beckons as we keep BBC One's appointment at Pebble Mill.
Thank you. Hello. Today, a couple of odd couples to take your mind off the cricket. Those leather-clad bikers, Boone and his sidekick Rocky. That's Michael Elphick and Neil Morrissey. And a lady New Yorker and an Englishman who took to the road on a voyage of discovery in Eastern Europe. And from Miss Moneypenny in a James Bond film to Chantal the estate agent in the comedy series French Fields, actress Pamela Salem. My musical guest is country and western singer Wayland Patton. The day has what you might call a cosmopolitan flavour, just like me. Let's start with our first unlikely couple, a female New York socialite and a hard-bitten London journalist. Add to that their shared desire to travel to Eastern Europe at a time of momentous change, and you have the ingredients for a sparky adventure story, a sharp and witty picture of hardship and humour, comedy and tragedy, the legacy of communism, lack of food and even an earthquake. And through it all, they managed to remain friends. Please welcome Iris Gioia and Clifford Thurlow. It's rather fun. I noticed that he was following 3 paces behind you, Iris.
Oh, well, I didn't see that.
That's what landmines.
Send the woman in first.
That's right.
What a gentleman.
Sorry.
It's a strange combination. I mean, New York socialite, Fleet Street hack. How did you meet?
Well, shall I tell it? We met at a party in New York. A friend of mine was having a party to celebrate her divorce. People do that sort of thing in America. And he was the only person I didn't know. I think he was wearing little round steel-rimmed glasses like John Lennon used to wear. And I thought he looked very interesting. So we started to talk.
You were chatted up then, were you?
Yeah.
I guess so. And after the 3rd glass of wine, anything could happen. And what happened was we decided to drive to Eastern Europe, basically.
Well, it was during that time when everything was happening in Eastern Europe. In November, the wall had come down in Berlin. In December, the Ceausescus were executed. In January, Václav Havel went from being a political prisoner to being president of his country. And Clifford was very excited about all this, and he wanted to go and see what was happening firsthand. So he made me very excited about it, and I said, I wish I could go with you. And he said, well, why don't you?
And you did.
So I did.
Clifford, did she approach it in the way you were approaching it this trip?
Oh, no, I think the whole thing was, for example, when she arrived in London, she came with 5 suitcases. And I arrived at her hotel with 1 little duffel bag, and I said, look, if it doesn't fit in there, it doesn't go. We wanted to be inconspicuous in as much as we could. And so we got over that little problem, and then we took off. Iris wanted to make reservations. I wanted to go to the outlying parts of Eastern Europe and see what was happening there. And so gradually it emerged that we found a pattern.
The common purpose came out. How do the book is pieces from both of you in a sort of his and hers right the way through. Was that the aim of going, Clifford? Did you set out to write a book of your travels?
No, I'd gone just to write an article. I wanted to see Eastern Europe. I was keeping a diary, as I always do. Iris, being American, was writing a journal. And we found that we had different views, often, of things. And as this evolved, I thought this is interesting. People are going to be interested in this. I also saw her life was changing very much. Her views were changing much more than mine, being a journalist. And I thought this is something that people would want to read about. So we then decided to put a book together. So that evolved rather than was planned.
A lot of people, of course, shot over to the wall at Berlin
That's right.
to have a look at, you know, the hole in the wall,
Yes,
as it
who
were.
can forget New Year's Eve at the wall with the fireworks and the
That's right, yeah.
music? It was wonderful.
But you went through it and
Yes,
on.
that's
now,
right.
we get lots of reports on the news, and there's always a man, isn't there, standing there, and there's East Europe behind him, and we tend to get what you might call receive news. You're doing it at first hand, so what sort of things strike you when you go over there?
Well, I think what struck me first was that it was like taking a trip back in time to before the Second World War. The way the people were dressed, the way they wore their hair, their shoes, lack of cars on the roads, which was rather nice. And
Lack of advertising,
exactly.
no billboards.
In the
anyway.
communist society, they didn't believe in free enterprise, so there was no competition, hence no advertising. This was rather nice. It was like seeing an old black and white movie. And that was my first impression, going through the wall into East Berlin.
Just stepping through a time wall.
Yes.
Yes.
What was the reaction to two travellers in a flashy Range Rover?
Well, the Range Rover came into it for a great deal of interest. They were particularly interested in the automatic locking system for some reason.
And the alarm system.
And the
that
alarm
we-
system, which would go off occasionally by mistake if people decided to push it around. And so that was interesting, but we wanted to look fairly official so that basically we weren't hassled along the way. But outside the Range Rover, the people themselves treated us with enormous respect and enormous friendliness. The people really wanted to create a new world, the world that they imagined we had in Western Europe, and therefore they treated us as ambassadors from this world.
Now, did you feel either uncomfortable or guilty during this, in that there you were really rather like spectators from the West coming through and nodding, in a way rather like colonials much earlier on in Britain, going out there, unable to do much and then coming back and talking about it? Was there a degree of powerlessness about
Well,
it?
I think that's the nature of travel, isn't it? And journalism. You go, you see, you look, and then you have to go home, unless you're Mother Teresa and you decide to stay and build a hospital.
But we are involved now. We are involved in a couple of charities, one in Romania and one in Bulgaria, because we were sufficiently moved. Those were the countries that need the most help. They are the poorest, they are suffering the most. And so yes, we were moved sufficiently to become involved.
But the people were very happy to see us. They kept saying, when you go back to your country, tell your friends to come. We need help, we need aid. They were very friendly. They didn't resent us being there in our big car.
That's right. They said, don't forget us. And so that's why we wrote a book.
How did you find the country in which there's been the most turbulence, I suppose, prior to Albania, Romania?
Romania. Well, we arrived 3 days after the election, and we stayed right in University Square. Demonstrations were going on round the clock because people were not happy with who won the election. And a lot of the young students felt the election had been stolen, that the people, there wasn't time to educate the people what democracy was all about. Isn't that right? And
Well, that's right. We befriended a mathematics professor who spoke wonderful English and who took us out to his grandparents' village. And it was one of the villages that had been systemized. And by systemized, it means that the authorities arrived one day, gave the people 24 hours notice to leave their homes. The following day, bulldozers arrived, dug holes in the gardens, and pushed the houses into the holes, stacked earth over the top, and made what to us, when we approached this village, like a giant graveyard with these giant graves. The idea of this was to move the people into the city, into small apartments where every apartment had a listening device. So Ceausescu could hear anyone in the whole nation speaking at any time. He was that paranoid.
You saw the palace too, that amazing edifice. That
Absolutely amazing. And also, for miles around the palace, there are buildings which were going to be for his security staff, all of which are empty. The palace itself has 7,000 rooms. They don't know what to do with it. Nobody knows what to do with it. It's just an incredible monstrosity.
Now, the story of your maths teacher has an unhappy ending.
It does. Very sadly, a few months after we returned to London, the authorities sent the miners into the square, and he actually died from a blow from a miner's baton. And we discovered this some weeks later, phoning every day until we got through to the university and spoke to his wife. That's why our book Brief Spring is dedicated to Stefan Cordescu. So it's a very sad story, and that's why we're involved still with Romania.
Coming back and looking at it now and reflecting on it, do you feel optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, I think each country was so different, and I think, for example, East Germany doesn't exist anymore. I don't think Poland will have problems, but in my opinion, Romania and Bulgaria will have the most problems, especially Romania, because the same people are in power. They've just changed their name.
Yes, nothing really has changed in Romania. This is the tragedy of Romania, that they've had this apparent revolution, people have died, but really nothing has changed. And that's why they need so much help from the West. They need education. We actually have a friend in the theatre who's gone out, involved in a theatrical group to start teaching and maybe having political theatre or whatever. People don't know yet how to organize a democracy, how to organize a new world, and so that's why they're in this situation.
How has it changed you two?
Well, I'd say it's made me more aware of the need for Europe to combine into one family. We're really one people. We have the same ethnic roots throughout the whole of Europe. I like the common market, and I'd like to see it expanded, I think. So from that point of view, I'm so pleased that this fourth Iron Curtain across Europe has gone and we are one people again.
And did it change the New York socialite?
Well, yes, it did. I knew that if I didn't take the chance and go off on the journey with Clifford, I would always regret it. I think in life you always regret what you haven't done rather than what you did. And so, in fact, we're planning another trip.
So the girl who went up and said to the man, "What are you doing?" and he said, "I'm going across Europe." Doesn't this mean that the relationship has survived?
Just about. You know, we've survived this far, and so we're going to Cuba, I think, in the new year to see what's happening with Fidel Castro and what we think might be the last days of communism there. So that's the next. So we're sort of communist voyeurs at the moment.
Most people, when they get together, go to a Mediterranean beach. This is certainly...
Well, in Cuba you can combine both. You can go to the beach and then write a book.
We look forward to that one. Great pleasure to talk to you. Clifford and Iris, thank you.
Thanks very much.